days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time, and what a wild 53-man roster reveal. The San Francisco 49ers made some very unique moves, and of course, we're going to have to unpack all of it because the 49ers cut down to 2 tight ends. The 49ers kept a few players we weren't expecting them to keep. It was just a different process. We even had a running back that went on a season-ending IR, and we thought he had just returned to practice. So there were shocking developments coming out of 49ers land in Santa Clara, and now we're going to have to pick up the pieces, go over the 53-man roster, see exactly who's on this 53-man roster, and figure it out. And I titled this initial 53-man roster. That's even how the 49ers put it out there, because there's going to be moves that happen after today. There's going to be players that are going to clear waivers. There's probably going to be some veterans that end up coming back once the 49ers make other moves. But this is entirely interesting. And Anthony says, some surprising moves. Number one in my book is Ambry Thomas making the 53-man roster. That was definitely surprising. I think with Ambry Thomas, just so we're clear, I think he's going on the IR in the next 24 to 48 hours, and the 49ers will get a roster spot from that. Will that go to a guy like Rock Yassin? Potentially they go with a guy like Rock Yassin. So there's going to be some things like that that come up where the 49ers elected to not put a player on a predetermined to return IR, but to just wait and do it the old-fashioned way, get them on the active roster, and then go ahead and waive or release. They're releasing veterans, and then they're going to get these other guys on IR. So it's going to be interesting. I think Ambry Thomas is more than likely going to end up on IR in the next 24 to 48 hours. Then the 49ers will bring someone back. It could be a tight end. It could ultimately be Rock Yassin. We'll see what happens as the 49ers look to make some decisions. But, yeah, that was interesting. I got the inclination over the last, couple days that was a possibility. I talked about it in my 53-man roster projection. Maybe Ambry Thomas is carried to the 53 and then put on IR. So it wasn't like a huge shocker to me, but definitely something that they did. And Josh says, hashtag TCC and welcome. And I'm going to get to everyone's comments. I guarantee it. I'm going to go through. So you guys, if you have questions, put them in chat. Let's go through them. Let's have a fun conversation. But I got to take care of a couple of things first. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college football kicking off, Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get today and use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV and get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. And I'm so into this conversation about who the 49ers are ultimately going to keep. And I see Josh says Tungus, tight end 2, love it. And I think there's going to be some interesting things that go on, with the 49ers as far as tight end room. I don't think for sure there's going to be 2 tight ends. Steve-O says 2 tight ends. Interesting. Pass first. I know that they're going to change this up, Steve-O. I know they're going to. And Josh says, Brock Yassin needs to come back. I think so too. And what's up, Kenny? Kenny in the house. So let's go through this a little bit. And, as you guys go, I'll try to mark your comments and we'll get to it. But let's go through the roster. There were some that were definitely not surprises. I think quarterback was not surprised. Brock Purdy, Josh Dobbs, Brandon Allen. 49ers elect to keep 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. Tanner Mordecai was cut. But I think especially with the new rule being vetoed yesterday, this was a foregone conclusion. I thought it was pretty clear already. 49ers were pretty dead set on those three quarterbacks. Now, when you get to running back is when you open an entirely new can of worms, because yes, we expected them to keep 5 running backs, but we were not expecting them to keep these particular 5 running backs. There's an interesting development that happened with running back. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, Patrick Taylor makes the 49ers 53-man roster, Isaac Guerendo, and Kyle Juszczyk. If you're asking what happened with Elijah Mitchell did not make the 49ers 53-man roster because they put him on season-ending injured reserve, which means he's done with the 49ers. He will not play for the 49ers in 2024. He's going to be able to test free agency next year. So his tenure in San Francisco looks like it's over, and it's the same hamstring injury that he's been dealing with, which is completely shocking to everyone that this is ending his season, because when you look at what he was able to do, he was able to come back to practice. So this has been shocking. Elijah Mitchell goes to season-ending IR. Of course, Cody Schrader was cut as well, waived. Matt Breida and Keyshawn Vaughn were released yesterday. So interesting developments when it came to the running back room. And Steve-O says, who is Patrick? So Patrick Taylor Jr., the 49ers signed from the Green Bay Packers during the offseason. He's 6'2", he's 218 pounds. He's known for his special teams, but the 49ers liked his upside running the football, catching the ball in the backfield. And early on in training camp, there was really good play coming from Patrick Taylor. I was excited about him, actually, because I thought he looked good. Then he suffered an injury and missed the end of training camp and the beginning of preseason. We didn't see him again until the finale, the preseason finale against the Raiders, and he scored a touchdown on a short yardage run. But they definitely like him. So it's interesting that he's one of those guys that's going to be, on the football team. And Josh says Mitchell injury doesn't surprise. The injury doesn't. I think the IR designation does. I think that surprised everyone that they're, hey, we're done with you for the whole year. They didn't just, cut him, waive him, let him get picked up. They weren't able to trade him. I think that's the part that's tough. And WTM says it clearly. JP Mason time. It is Jordan Mason time in San Francisco as the backup running back. The questions now about running back 2 are answered. So I think that's where we're at. Lou says, Elijah Mitchell still belongs to us next year as his contract won't occur the last year, I believe. I'm not sure exactly what happens with IR. I do know you have to play 6 games for it to be considered an accrued season, but I don't remember if an injury causes it not to toll. So that I'm not sure. We'll see what happens with that. I would expect at some point that maybe they come to an injury settlement and Elijah Mitchell becomes a free agent. So I don't know the particulars on that exact, an injury like season-ending IR and what that means for him and if his year doesn't toll. I'll wait and see what happens because I don't know that right now. Steven, how's it going? It says, so we only have 2 tight ends. Yes, that is correct. So let's go through the tight ends real quick, and we'll just keep it clear. The 49ers kept George Kittle, and they kept Jake Tunges. This could have been the most surprising of the rooms. Not so much that they kept Kittle and Tunges, because a lot of people were saying, hey, Jake Tunges is going to make this team. I feel that they could have, cut him and he could have made it to the practice squad. 49ers felt differently, and that's fine. I think where it got surprising is when they waived Braden Willis and they waived Cameron Latu, the thought process was, okay, well, they're going to keep the veterans. They're going to go there. But everyone has been pretty much in unison that tight end 2 has been Eric Saubert since training camp. Eric Saubert was released. So Logan Thomas was released. Now, I did talk about vested veterans, and we know that players with more than 4 accrued seasons, they don't have to clear waivers. They bypass straight through. So guys like Eric Saubert is a great player to potentially release, knowing he's going to come back in the next 24 to 48 hours, re-sign with the 49ers after they've made other roster moves to bolster tight end. So I don't think there's any way the 49ers are going into week 1 against the New York Jets with just 2 tight ends. So Eric Saubert or Logan Thomas or both are potentially coming back to the 49ers roster once they make other moves. And so we'll be getting to those players at other positions where they're going to make moves. But right now, you're right. It's George Kittle as Jake Tunges. And the 49ers went 25 offensive players, 25 defensive players. And they had to make some room on their roster because they kept more players at some positions that we weren't expecting. So that's what makes it really tough. And Steven says, I understand Latu should have kept Thomas, though. And we'll see. I mean, Logan Thomas, another vested veteran, he doesn't clear through waivers. He's already released. If they told him, hey, just park it and wait, this is something the 49ers do. They've done it with Tyler Kroft. They did it with Ross Dwelly. Then they bring him back. They used to do it with Kerry Hyder. They have these agreements with these players, and they come back to the roster once they've made other moves. Moves like getting John Feliciano and Ambry Thomas to the IR. Though after those things happen, they'll potentially pick up these guys and bring them back on the roster. And those two guys, maybe it won't be both. Maybe it'll be one. You would think it would be Logan Thomas if you're keeping Jake Tunges, but Eric Saubert's been so good. I mean, I think he's the best blocking tight end, not named George Kittle. So I don't know. We'll see what the 49ers end up doing with that. I think it's interesting. And Josh, he says, no, Jacob Kingston sucks. And let's go through the offensive line because, Jacob Kingston is gone. And, this is one of the concerns. I ended up putting him on my 53-man roster yesterday because I thought there was a chance they would keep him in fear of losing him. He's been so good at pass blocking. The run blocking is definitely not all the way there. But if you could carry him, and this is one thing I had told John Chapman last week on our show, is how do you keep Jared Kingston? Finding a way was the ultimate goal for me. And I thought I found it yesterday with putting John Feliciano on the IR and him coming back during the season, the predetermined. But that's not what the 49ers ended up doing. And Jared Kingston got waived. He's on the open market. Last year, we saw Arizona claim 2 of our offensive linemen, Keith Ishmael and Il Manning. So it's possible Jared Kingston gets picked up. Now, the best case scenario for the 49ers, he clears waivers. He ends up on their practice squad. They continue to develop him. And next year, he has a better shot of making the football team. We've seen other offensive linemen go to the practice squad and come back, including Colt McKivitz, who's a right tackle starter for the 49ers. So, let's talk about the offensive lineman. Trent Williams is on an exempt list. He is not on the active 53 right now, but at any time when he signs, he can come right off that exempt list and be ready to go. So the offensive line goes with 8 offensive linemen, not 9, because they elected to not keep Jared Kingston. They're keeping Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Colt McKivitz, Jalen Moore, Dominic Pooney, Spencer Burford, Nick Sakel, and then John Feliciano. And the expectation is over the next 24 to 48 hours, John Feliciano is going to go on the IR, and then that's going to free up a roster spot. Then at that point, the 49ers could elect to sign another offensive tackle. Now, that could also mean Trent Williams just comes back and you feel comfortable. There is a likelihood, though, that Chris Hubbard could be making his way to this active roster once the 49ers make a decision, because the 49ers did release Chris Hubbard. He is a vested veteran and one that I had talked about before. Could they get him on the practice squad and elevate him? They could, and that would be big for the 49ers. So Hubbard is a potential player that could be elevated. I know he didn't look great at left tackle, but this is a guy that in his career predominantly played right. Coach Chris Forster was playing with him and Brandon Parker playing him on the opposite side just in case they had to play swing tackle. So I don't think we've seen the best of Chris Hubbard, and so I think he could be that guy, because right now the 49ers have 2 offensive tackles on their active roster because Trent Williams isn't there. You can have a swing tackle with Jalen Moore and only keep 3 tackles. Burford, of course, played tackle in college. Zakel played tackle in college. Those are emergency situations. So we'll see what happens. But I think there's going to be more movement here once John Feliciano gets put on, the season, or not the season ending, but the IR. And then the 49ers can bring him back if they want. And they don't have to. And I think that's one of the keys to only having one player destined for return, is they will still have 7 spots they can use. And ultimately, if they don't need John Feliciano, they could just leave him on the IR for the whole year. So I think that's why they're doing it. That was a big reason why. So the guys getting cut, of course, Chris Hubbard, Jared Kingston, Ben Barch, Brandon Parker, Drake Nugent. I know a lot of people like him. Maybe he'll revert back to the practice squad. The International Pathway Program player, Isaac Alarcon, I expect him as well to end up on the practice squad. And then Sebastian Gutierrez. So those are guys, that are going to be there. And what's up, Eric Dane? How's it going? David Manzini in the house, or Mazzini. How's it going? Welcome to the chat. And lots of people are talking about this offensive line. And Mr. Corey, I see Mr. Corey's in the house. He says no one's going to claim Kingston. Maybe they won't. Good pass blocker, though. I mean, he was really good at pass blocking. The run blocking could get better. Jalen Graham will get claimed, according to Mr. Corey. It could happen. Josh says McKivitz and Moore as your starters is not good. That's the picture we're in right now, right? With no Trent Williams, that's where you're at. Jalen Moore and Colton McKivitz are going to be the starting right tackle and left tackle combination heading into the Jets unless Trent Williams comes back. And really, there's no answer for right tackle beyond Colton McKivitz. He is your starter. There's no heir apparent. There's no one that's pushing for that role. And maybe there's a player that ends up being released that you go ahead and get. I don't think that's likely. I think they're rolling with Colton McKivitz this year. And, that's just some of the things we're still seeing. The 49ers 2024 says practice squad players can still be claimed. So here's how it works. There's no one on the practice squad right now. The 49ers actually had 92 players that were a part of the team because Trent Williams was on an exemption list. 91, including Isaac Alarcon, who is a part of the International Pathway Program. Most teams have 90. They had to cut down to 53. They left Trent Williams on the exemption list. They got an an extra way to do that. So that took care of one. Alarcon, they did waive. So what it is any players that have 4 vested seasons or 4 accrued seasons are vested veterans, they don't have to go through waivers. They can just be available. They're free agents right away. Any players with less than 4 accrued seasons, they have to clear waivers. Once players clear waivers and are not claimed, they can be put on the 49ers practice squad. So actually no one's on the practice squad until players aren't claimed. If they are claimed, the team that claims them must put them on their 53-man roster to start the season. So that's why if you're going to claim someone, you have to make sure they're going to start for your football team. And so that's one of the tough things. Derek says, do you know if Drake Jackson made the roster? So Drake Jackson was put on the PUP list and the reserve PUP list. He's not coming back this year. He's done for the season. So he's on the inactive PUP list. He's going to be out for the entire season. Next year will be the time for Drake Jackson to potentially come back. So we'll see what happens. And, that's kind of one of the ways that, they have to build rosters is they have to move guys around. Josh says, why does Ambry make this team? I don't get why they keep him consistently. So I think that they just feel comfortable with having Ambry Thomas around. And I don't know what the end game is for Ambry Thomas because one of the things that we got to remember when we're talking about cornerback is the 49ers have plenty of depth now. But I think the 49ers like the idea of carrying him on the active 53 and then stashing him on the IR. If for some reason they run into a situation where they're dealing with a influx of injuries, they can bring Ambry Thomas back. If they don't, they just leave Ambry Thomas on the IR. So I think that's what the 49ers are thinking. They kind of have a spare player that they can just kind of park in case they need him. I think that's what the injury afforded them, to not have to make a decision right now on Ambry Thomas. But I would say his play hasn't determined that he should make this football team. But ultimately, if you get down to it, maybe you want him to be your 6th, 7th cornerback that you end up going in with. So that could be the case of what they're doing with Ambry Thomas there. Lou says, priority number 1, we must use whatever draft capital is needed to move way up for a first-round tackle in 2025. It doesn't matter how many picks it takes. I don't think that's what the 49ers are going to do. I mean, just listening to Chris Verser, he talked about pretty much if you don't get an offensive tackle in the top 10, and it takes a lot to get in the top 10. Remember Trey Lance, you just got to be careful. So we've seen them strike in years past, not this current regime, on offensive tackles at the end of the first round. I think the 49ers do need to address offensive tackle at some point. But Chris Verser's comments about what's the difference between a late first-round pick and a third-round pick, it could be a good example of how the 49ers view offensive line. And I think case in point and case study is Dominic Pooney. I know he's not a tackle, but they just got a guard of the future in round 3. And so I think when you're looking at that, that kind of proves a little bit to the point of what they do. Now, do I think it always works? No. Do I think I would love to have one of those tackles at the beginning of the first round? Absolutely. I just don't think they're going to spend draft capital on that because the way that you swing and miss in drafts, and we see it every single year with the 49ers cuts, you have to make sure volume is the key. You're going to hit on 2 or 3 picks per draft if you're lucky, and the rest of them don't work out. But if you can hit on those guys, it helps your football team. So I like the 49ers method of drafting. I think they did a really good job this season. Of course, it's going to be a wait and see approach. We'll see what happens, but it's looking good. I just don't know if they're going to be able to do that. So David says, if Trent takes this year off, the backup quarterback becomes real. Purdy would get blindsided at some point. 49ers can't afford for Trent Williams to take the year off. And Trent Williams can't really afford to take the year off. Not the whole year. Maybe sit out for a little bit. So it's possible. Maybe. But yeah, I don't think so. Josh says Hufanga not starting on PUP is exciting. That is exciting. I had come to grips with it. I was the whole time, Hufanga is going to make it back. And then over the last few days, I kind of moved off of that. And it's exciting that he's going to be back. Means potential for week 1. I don't know if that's likely, but maybe week 2, week 3. That's the good news for the 49ers. WTM says, hit that like button. Thank you, WTM, for putting it out there. I really appreciate it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the defense. So the San Francisco 49ers elected to keep 9 defensive linemen. And this took me a second to figure out. Of course, I had predicted they were going to keep 8, but they keep an extra one. On the edge, Nick Bosa, no surprise. Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, the new free agents, no surprise. Maybe Gross-Matos' injury affects the 49ers' decisions because they keep Robert Beal Jr. and Sam Okawanu. So Sam Okawanu makes the 49ers' initial 53-man roster, and I think this is direct correlation to Yetur Gross-Matos' injury. Without those injuries, they probably only keep 8. So I think that's something to remember. And then, of course, Drake Jackson's on the PUP. Now, with the defensive tackle position, Javon Hargrave, Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, they're your rotation, your Alpha and Bravo groups on your defensive line. And then Kalia Davis is going to be on IR, but he has been cleared he's going to come back at some point during the year. So he's IR, destined for a return. That's good news for the 49ers. They cut Alex Barrett. He'll probably end up on the 49ers practice squad. Jonathan Garvin, he did a pretty good job during the preseason. T.Y. McGill's been a part of the Niners practice squad for 2 seasons. Shaquille Brown and Evan Anderson. We'll see if they don't get claimed. One of them will likely end up on the San Francisco 49ers practice squad. And that's the key. I mean, you're trying to get some of these guys back. That's what you want. And Mr. Corey says Roger Rosengarten is starting at right tackle for Baltimore. You're right. He is. And I think Roger Rosengarten's looked pretty good. And I've seen some bad plays from him as well. I think Rosengarten was somebody the 49ers were high on. But I think they decided they weren't going to trade up to get Rosengarten, which means they didn't love him. They liked him. They didn't love him. And so they ended up going with Renardo Green. And if we end up getting a cornerback that replaces what we were getting from either Yamada Lenore or Travarius Ward, because we're going to have to make decisions on them, and Renardo Green is that guy, it's worth the pick. I know it was an offensive line, and I know everyone's focused on offensive line, but, it could end up working out for the 49ers and working out for Baltimore. It definitely happens that way. Eric says, if the 49ers take a tackle in the first round, it would be the first time they did it since Mike McGlinchey. And I think that's another case study. They took Mike McGlinchey at number 9 overall in the draft, and I don't think they felt they got first-round offensive tackle play out of him. He's really good against the run, or really good blocking in the run game. Fantastic. But I don't feel like they felt they got the most out of it. They feel like if you're going to pick in the top 10, you should get something that's going to be your left tackle of the future and forever. And so I think that makes them a little gun shy and makes them refocus the way that they go about building their offense. And I think that's a big reason why. And so I think it's, it's not exactly the way that everyone would build a team, but this is how the 49ers definitely go about it. Kenny says, Ant, be real with me. Our linebackers are not it, right? We are not strong there. So let's go through the linebackers that make this football team. And the San Francisco 49ers elect to keep 6. Fred Warner, Devondre Campbell are no surprise. D. Winters is dealing with an ankle. That makes me a little nervous, but he's the 3rd best linebacker in my opinion. They decide to keep 2 veterans, Curtis Robinson and DFF. The DFF one, I figured they probably would keep him, but I tried on my projection to say maybe he'll be a vested veteran and they'll use that to keep Jalen Graham. That didn't happen. DFF makes the team. And then Tatum Bethune, who showed a lot of promise, a 7th-round pick that makes this team and replaces the 7th-round pick in Jalen Graham from last year. I think that the 49ers, and of course, Trey Greenlaw is on the PUP list. I think that the starting unit for the San Francisco 49ers is not bad. And I think Curtis Robinson has played pretty well. I do believe there's one interesting name or actually a couple of them that just came out, but one interesting name that the 49ers might go ahead and keep an eye on, and maybe he joins the practice squad, is Oren Burks. Really good special teams player, started at Sam Backer last year. 49ers could always bring him back. But I do not feel confident with DFF starting. But I said on the Ant Hill show yesterday over on Patreon, it would not surprise me if DFF was starting week 1 against the Jets. I think that we're good with the first couple guys, the first 3 guys, if D Winters is healthy. And then after that, yeah, I mean, you fall off a little bit. Tatum Bethune's not ready when it comes to coverage. DFF is good in coverage, but not very good when it comes to stopping the run. He just doesn't pull the trigger. Looks like his feet are stuck in the dirt. And then Curtis Robinson, I thought, had a very good camp. So maybe he can play really well. Maybe, he's that guy, Curtis Robinson. I think it's a good linebacker room. I don't think it's a great linebacker room. They don't have that third guy right now. I was waiting for D Winters to make more plays in the preseason, and I didn't see it. But I do think he's pretty good for those 20 to 25 snaps. So I think Kenny, I mean, I don't think it's like bad, but I don't think it's really great right now. Josh says linebacker play is really good. I think it's several guys there is. I really like Devondre Campbell too. I got to admit, I really do. I can't wait for Campbell, Warner, and Drake Greenlaw. I think that's going to be phenomenal. And I'm very intrigued with D Winters. And then I think Curtis Robinson has improved the 4th linebacker spot because he's past DFF in my opinion as far as play. So I do like that. And WTM says, Coach Ant, is this the best DB group we've had in about 10 years? Well, let's look at the cornerbacks because the 49ers elected to keep Charvarius Ward, who is a number 1 corner on almost every team in the league. He's really good. Deommodore Lenoir, who's going to take a next step forward. The Hyenas, really good. Renardo Green, the upstart rookie, he's going to be fantastic. Isaac Yedem, I expect to start when the 49ers go to nickel package. I expect him to be in there. Darrell Luter Jr., a young guy they're very high on. They keep him. And then they keep Ambry Thomas. And I think Ambry Thomas, we talked about him a little bit in the episode, so you guys know my feelings. I expect him to go to IR, and maybe that frees up a roster spot for Rock Yassin, who they went ahead and released, a vested veteran who can sit back, wait, and then potentially re-sign. I'm guessing John Lynch might talk about some of this tomorrow, but that's why this is initial 53-man roster. And really, there's never a final 53-man roster. Everything continues to change. It's a living, breathing thing. They move players in and players out. And so they'll even be scouring and looking to see who was waived, who was released, and see if they can bring them in to help this football team. I do think this cornerback room is very good. I think that if you go ahead and you add Rock Yassin back in, and you're talking Ward, Lenoir, Yedem, Yassin, Renardo Green, and Darrell Luter Jr., I think that this cornerback room is fantastic. And then you look at the safeties, and you've got Talanoa Hufanga, who, like Josh said earlier, is not going to start on the PUP list. He's getting activated, which means practice tomorrow for Talanoa Hufanga. Jair Brown, who has showed shades of being a brilliant playmaker. So let's see what he can do. Malik Mustafa flies around and makes tackles. He needs to get a little bit better at tackling. He needs to get a little bit better in recognition of concepts, but he'll get there. George Odom, who I think has definitely earned any playing time that he gets. He's looked really good. I think they're set 4 deep now. And so I think when you look at it, Hufanga and Jair Brown, and we'll just act like that, with Charvarius Ward, Deommodore Lenoir, and Isaac Yedem, I do believe you're right. I think that is probably the best DB room the 49ers have had in about 10 years. It's definitely the best defensive back room the 49ers have had in the John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan tenure, where most of their focus has been on defensive line. I think they've done a really good job. So I think it's really good. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited about that group right there and what they could potentially do. And, this is Kenny says this, Forrester and Kyle Shanahan you can get good O-linemen later in the draft. That's what they believe. They do believe that they can do that. And so I'm excited to see that. Mr. Corey says, I predicted Winters would beat out Campbell. Don't think he did. No, he didn't. And the truth is, Devondre Campbell is just steady, right? His footwork's good. His technique's good. His recognition's good. His tackling is good. He's going to be stout next to Fred Warner. He's going to get us through the games where we don't have Dre Greenlaw. Is he going to be Dre Greenlaw? No. Dre Greenlaw's special. He's an enforcer. But Campbell brings a little bit of that attitude as well. That's why I'm hoping that D. Winters becomes that player that can show that electric ability to create losses for the offense. If that happens, that three-man group on the 20% of snaps that D. Winters is actually going to play on the field could be really, really fun. So I'm excited about that. David says DFF is a linebacker version of Dante Johnson. You know what? I never thought of that. You are correct, sir. That's 100% right. It's like he comes in and he makes a couple of plays. He helps you on special teams. But for the most part, you ask the question, why is this guy still on the roster? And, you know, I don't know when the time is going to run out for DFF. I'm hoping that these young players are going to step in and eventually be the next wave to fill in the holes for the San Francisco 49ers linebacker room. But right now, you know, I don't feel real confident with DFF being the starting Sam backer if that's the case. And that could be the case if you've got an injury to D. Winters that's going to linger and not make him available week one. So I don't know. I don't really like the idea of DFF starting. I know that Fred Warner's very comfortable with him. I would prefer Curtis Robinson if D. Winters isn't available. But, you know, it's frustrating, that's for sure. And what's up, Tommy? Tommy's in the chat. He says, what's up, big dog? Doing good. You know, I'll be honest, like when I saw the roster, you know, finally all the cuts, I'm looking at it and I'm like, some of these moves were very interesting. I mean, very interesting. And I know some of it's going to shake out. So I was trying to figure out, okay, this guy's going on IR. This guy's going to eventually come back. Figuring all that out is very difficult. So it was an interesting moment there as the San Francisco 49ers officially, you know, went ahead and put out their cuts and releases. It was interesting. Josh said, I'd take Webb from the Las Vegas Raiders at corner over Luter and Ambry. So with Ambry Thomas, I think I'm definitely with you as far as moving on. I think with Luter Jr., he got no training camp last year, and even this year, limited training camp, and that's a health issue. So, you know, at some point, you do have to cut bait if a guy can't stay healthy. But I do like some of Luter Jr.'s game. I like the length. I think he's starting to learn how to play with his body. I think watching a guy like Rock Yassin, that physicality, playing with length, has been very good for Darrell Luter Jr. If he could emulate Rock Yassin, I think that would be very good for him. So I think with 3 years of control, if you count 2024, 2025, and 2026, you got to think that you keep him now for upside because next year you have a lot of one-year contracts that you're going to have to replace, you know, potentially Charvarius Ward, Deommodore Lenoir, Isaac Yedem. Those guys are probably, you know, maybe one or two of those guys come back, maybe, you know, one. I mean, it's going to be tough to figure out. Luter Jr. could figure into future plans. But I'm with you on Ambry. Like, I just don't get it. Tommy says, I told everyone that Latu was gone. He sucks. You know, with Cameron Latu, it came down to, you know, just like some of the other guys. Do you keep him and see if you could develop him? Because if you're keeping 4 tight ends, the 4th guy is inactive the whole time. 49ers felt that wasn't the way. Maybe they feel after fielding phone calls, because, you know, they're going to get trade calls. They're going to get, you know, some people figuring it out. Maybe they felt like they could get Cameron Latu or Braden Willis, one or the other, to the practice squad. And so they went ahead and waived them. I don't blame them. I think we got inconsistent play from both of them. I think when you look at them, you see like, oh, what their upside could be. But you're a Super Bowl win now team. You can't always go on what a person could do in the future. And so positions that you can, you do. Positions that you can't, you don't. And the 49ers felt they couldn't with both of those guys. So, yeah, you're right about Cameron Latu. He did not make this team. That is for sure. And Kenny says, I'm sure we'll hear some complaints about Tunges this season from the faithful. I'm sure we will. You know, I mean, I think Jake Tunges is an interesting player only because, you know, he made the team in Chicago as a fullback. And then he got waived, and he ends up coming to the 49ers practice squad. And he's done a really good job of putting on a lot of weight on his body. He's gotten better. He comes from Cal. And so he's a local guy as far as the 49ers are well aware of who he is. And he had a good training camp. Do I think he blew anyone out of the water? No. Do I think he's better than Eric Saubert? No. And so this is one of those interesting things with once the releases started coming out and Jake Tunges was still there. It's like, wow, they decided to keep Jake Tunges. And you know what? A lot of people called it. I thought he was a player that they could get to the practice squad, but maybe people were calling about Jake Tunges. I don't know. And so I think that's one of those interesting things that the 49ers end up keeping Tunges. And we know they're not going to keep 2 tight ends. It's going to go 3, possibly 4, once the 49ers make roster decisions, because when you look at that wide receiver room, and I don't even know if we touched on wide receivers because we were jumping around, but the fact that they kept Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, no shocks, Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Chris Conley, and the shock of shocks, they kept a 7th wide receiver in Ronnie Bell. And that means they cut Tay Martin, Danny Gray, Trent Taylor. They cut Devontae Kirkland. I couldn't believe they kept Bell. My guess is it has something to do with Ayuk. So that's another roster spot that could come open. And maybe it ends up being a trade. Maybe they end up waiving Ronnie Bell at some point. Or maybe something happens with Pearsall. I don't know. And I know that Jawan Jennings has been dealing with an oblique. Brandon Ayuk's been doing a hold in. He hasn't been there. But I thought it was crazy. They kept 7 wide receivers on the initial 53-man roster. This could likely change. We'll see. But, I mean, the fact that it was Bell, too, you know what I mean? They decided to go with Ronnie Bell. I don't think Ronnie Bell had a particularly good training camp or preseason. So it was kind of shocking to me. But they ultimately go out and do it, and that's all you can really ask for. So, they're making some moves, and Josh says, right. Oh, let's see right here. Tommy says, I thought Saubert was tight end 2. I was dead wrong. I don't think you're entirely wrong, Tommy. Just because he's a vested veteran, I think he could be back in the next 24 to 48 hours. The same way they did with Croft and Ross Dwelly. So there's potential for him to come back. And so I don't think you're wrong yet. I think that him or Logan Thomas or both could be back once John Feliciano goes to the IR, once Ambry Thomas goes to the IR. Maybe they figure something out with wide receiver. Maybe Jawan Jennings checks out okay. We'll find out. They'll make some decisions ultimately and get this thing figured out. And that's what Kenny and Josh are saying as well. Saubert could be back. And I think that is very, very possible. And what's going up? How's it going, SG? Glad you are here. Hope you're doing well. Lou says, we know that San Francisco knew Pearsall had a chronic shoulder issue coming out of college. And once again, the 49ers performed the Javon Kinlaw draft strategy. It depends on what you consider chronic, right? They said that he did it in his junior year. So he had an injury his junior year. That would mean that he suffered an injury. He did not miss any games. So it happened during the offseason. He did not miss any games. He played the entire junior year and his entire senior year. And so I think if you're a team and you're doing due diligence and you know this happened, yeah, when you have a shoulder injury, it's likely to happen. I played football for a long time. I have bad shoulders, and I had one that got really messed up. And so is shoulder problems going to be a part of football? Absolutely. If it had happened multiple times, and if it comes out that Ricky Pearsall, had it happen his sophomore year and his junior year, then I'm with you on chronic possibly issue, and they overlooked it. I think this is a different scenario than Javon Kinlaw. I get the kind of the thought process because we've been burned by injuries before. But I think that with this happening one time, and, I've seen doctors say it looks like this is going to be okay. And this is kind of a normal thing. And that, it happened in OTAs. And I just don't think they gave it enough time to clear up. So I wouldn't go that far that you went. I understand where you're coming from, though. And I just think that, when it comes to Ricky Pearsall, the 49ers felt that it was going to work. And, and maybe it still will. I will say this. From my time at training camp, Ricky Pearsall is good. Okay. I was saying it. I still believe it. If you thought Isaac Arendo looked good in the last preseason game or that Jacob Cowing has tore it up, let me just tell you, Ricky Pearsall is going to help this 49ers offense when he's healthy. I can't be more clear than that. I really like him. Josh says Bell should have been cut. 100% agree. I mean, the thing is, you could have taken a player from the practice squad and elevated him if you were worried about having a wide receiver that you needed on this football team. I don't think that he played well enough. And you know what? That's okay, though. The 49ers ended up keeping him. Let's see what happens. Maybe something will get figured out. David says, Latu and Willis and Thomas surprised me. Let's see how the real 53 pans out. That's it. The real 53. We got the initial. Let's see what happens over the next 48 hours and how the 49ers build this thing. Because I do think changes are coming. But I think we got a pretty good picture on some guys. We know how they're doing with some positions. But, I mean, the likelihood is if they can get one of their veteran offensive tackles to the practice squad, they don't really have to carry another offensive tackle. They could just elevate somebody. With wide receiver, I mean, they have an abundance now. But tight end, they're probably going to add someone to this tight end room. My guess would be that when Feliciano and Ambry Thomas go on IR, that they will sign at least one tight end. Maybe it's Rock Yassin and a tight end. Maybe it's Logan Thomas and Eric Saubert. I don't know. I thought it was weird. They signed Logan Thomas last week on Thursday, knowing he wasn't going to play in the Friday matchup with the Raiders, and then released him again today. I don't know. It's kind of weird to me. So we'll see what they do. And maybe they'll figure this out. WTM says, Coach Ant, would you be surprised if our D-line is better this year than last year? I don't think I'd be surprised. I think it's a different makeup of defensive line. I think once Kalia Davis gets back too, and you're in a 5-man rotation, it's going to be really fun because of the penetration. But Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott, they are difference makers. And I think the 49ers improved. And I know we liked Javon Kinlaw, couldn't really stay healthy, but I think Jordan Elliott's an upgrade over Javon Kinlaw. I can't say Malik Collins is an upgrade over Eric Armstead because Armstead was a really good player, but Malik Collins is very good. And I think him and Jordan Elliott together might be better than the combination of Armstead and Kinlaw together. Givens is a wash, right? He was a part of that rotation last year. Hargrave looks in better shape. If he can be a better version, then yes, this interior defensive line could be better than it was. And then you throw in the fact that the Bosa and Leonard Floyd is the best combination we've had for Nick Bosa since his 2019 rookie year with D Ford. Etor Gross-Matos has the ability to be a big-time Arden Key type player. I think the depth is the question. Is it Sam Okawanu, Robert Beal? One of those guys have to step up and really help this football team. And we'll see. Maybe the 49ers address it again. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this defensive line ends up being a little bit better. David Morazzo says, trade for Tyree Wilson, let Kasarik cook. Yeah, they're not happy with the top 10 draft pick who hasn't really worked out for the Raiders. I was watching to see if maybe they were going to end up trading him. They have not yet. If he doesn't, nothing happens with him this year, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get the Arden Key treatment and end up getting released, waived, and then the San Francisco 49ers going and pouncing and doing what they do. You're 100%. That guy makes a tremendous amount of sense for what the 49ers could have done. It would have been fun for sure. And so you've got guys that are going to continue to make this team. It's interesting how some of it went. David says, Ant, what O-line position did you play? I played center. I kind of came into center when I was a freshman in high school and kind of just started getting to where I enjoyed it. So yeah, I played center. It was fun. It was interesting being in the mix every single play. I liked it. I think I learned a lot more about football post play. That's when I really started going to a lot of clinics and learning a lot of football. And that's when I transitioned into coaching as well. But I wish I would have known a lot when I played. But I had a lot of fun and I played. But yeah, the center was the position for me, and I really liked it. And that's why I kind of gravitate towards offensive line play, even though I was offensive coordinator. I've been head coach and done all that for many years. I gravitate to offensive line play because that was also not just the position I played, but the first position that I coached. So I have a real nice grip on what happens there. Josh says, which player being cut hurt you the most, and if any? I don't think there was one that really hurt me. I think there was a couple of guys that I've been frustrated with because I see the potential in them, but it's never materialized. And I think that's also the coach in me where it's like, I see what this guy could be. And we always have players like this. You see the player and what they could be, but it doesn't mean they're going to reach that expectation because they have to be able to make things happen. But I thought the two guys that really caught my attention in this, and there's probably three total that frustrated me a little bit. Danny Gray, because I think he could have been something else, and I liked him since SMU, but he never put it together, and I think that's frustrating. Cameron Latu, and you know what? He just never executed the blocks the way he was supposed to. He hasn't grown in the offense fast enough. I mean, is it day and night from last year? Absolutely, but you're in a Super Bowl team. You have to be playing good right now, and he's not there. He's a couple years away or a year away from potentially helping a team, 2 years from being a really good player. I see that potential in him. Is he going to reach that? I don't know. I don't know what his work ethic is. I don't know what he's like in meetings. Those are some of the hard part when you're watching guys. Those two guys were like, man, potential-wise, you see it, but you understand why you have to move on. And then the third one's Elijah Mitchell. And the reason being is you know what he can do on this football team. Do I believe Elijah Mitchell is better than Patrick Taylor? Yes. And so in that case, that's where I'm looking at it. Do I think Jordan Mason can handle business? Absolutely. But I would have liked having that one more year of Elijah Mitchell. Next year, Isaac Guerrero take over that role. So I think those were guys that I kind of saw, and it was like, man, that's kind of frustrating that those guys never developed into, the players that you're hoping. And so those things are very frustrating, but you understand it. And Mr. Corey says what everyone's thinking. Danny Gray's going to end up catching bombs on the Chiefs. Somebody's going to take a chance with Danny Gray. I did see a report. The 49ers were definitely interested in getting Danny Gray to the practice squad. I don't know if he'll clear waivers. Maybe he will. I mean, the guy's only had one catch, right, in his 2 seasons in the NFL as far as in the regular season. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Lou says, Ant, given the Lamb deal, when will San Francisco tell BA agent to sign or play on the 5th-year option and or start the fines? They need to end this madness. I think it's coming. The rubber is about to meet the road for Brandon Ayuk. He gets paid, like around a little over $800,000 per game. He will start incurring fines. So at some point, it's going to happen. He's either going to be out on the field practicing and playing in games, or he's going to get fined. And he's made $12 million over his whole career. He's going to make $14 million this year. You can't turn down that money if you're Brandon Ayuk. So at some point, he's just running out of time. And I think it's getting real close to that decision needing to be made. Jamar Chase showed up with the Bengals, and he's practicing now, and he expects to play week 1. Same sort of thing. So I think that's where we're going to say it, or we're going to see it happen. David says, Guerrero has elite traits. He does. The speed and size. Those are the first 2 things that jump off the screen. If you look at Elijah Mitchell coming out of college, it was the same sort of thing. Size is over 220 pounds at the time. Now he cut down and lost some weight, but 220, but he could run a 4.340. Tremendous speed size combination. Not quite as gifted as Isaac Guerrero as far as speed. I will say this right now. Elijah Mitchell in his rookie year was more gifted as far as vision and just being able to feel it, get vertical and get his foot in the ground than Isaac Guerrero. But Guerrero has less wear and tear on his body than Elijah Mitchell. So I'm hopeful that he's going to be that guy. He's showed that he's got hands to catch the football. So I do like Isaac Guerrero, and I'm hoping he develops into a player that can really help this 49ers football team because they need it. Josh says, Trent is more important than Ayuk. You know what? I think that you're right. Trent is more important. Trent plays a position that's one of the most important in the entire NFL. And I think if you put him in order, you're going to go number 1, quarterback, number 2, offensive tackle, and number 3, defensive end. Any way you can affect the quarterback is the most important. So I think that's where they're going. Left tackle, especially with Trent Williams, it's important for them to figure out. So that's exactly what they have to do. And, and that's pretty much what everyone's echoing in chat. David says Trent is more important to Brock, in my opinion, and or more important as Brock. Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think he's very important. And, Lou asked here, what's the holdup with Trent's contract? I don't know. I know it has to do with guaranteed money. And he's won in his next 3 years. The way the 49ers structured the contract was beautiful. The way that he was going to age is there's no guaranteed money. So that way, if he decided that he was going to walk, off into the sunset and retire, that they weren't on the hook for a bunch of money, guaranteed money from Trent Williams. But the problem is now he wants to play. And with that comes, He wants to get paid guaranteed money to do so. And so they've got to figure out a way to make this work that doesn't mean they completely add on 3 more years of the deal. It would be simple if they could add on 3 more years. The problem is he's not going to play maybe he won't play for 3 more years. And so if that's the case, you move the guaranteed money to the next 3 seasons, and all of a sudden those seasons at the end, you're just on the hook for it. So that's one of the problems the 49ers are running into. They're halfway through the deal, and now they're looking at a situation where he wants to extend this thing, and we don't know what Trent Williams' ultimate timetable is for playing. We've heard rumors he wants to play till he's 40. He's 36 years old. If he wants to play till he's 40, maybe they can withstand another contract extension. If not, they got to just figure out how to give him guaranteed money without completely breaking the bank, because right now they have over $50 million set to roll over to next season. That would put them in a good spot because it looks like they're going to be over the cap next year. But if you can roll that money over, then their adjusted cap changes. Plus, we know the cap is going to jump. So all those things would definitely help him. That is for sure. Eric says, is Guerendo closer to Mitchell or Mostert in terms of speed? I think he's closer to Mitchell. Maybe a little bit faster than Mitchell, but Mostert is just different. I put Raheem Mostert up there with some of the most elite, fast NFL players of all time. He's just got different speed. He outruns defensive backs that are 4.3 guys like it's no problem. There's fast, and then there's Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill fast. And I think Raheem Mostert's just at a different level than a lot of the other guys. He's been really, really good. But Guerendo being 220 pounds is the difference between him and Mostert. He runs through tackles. That one, he got a toss play. The guy had him completely squared up against the Raiders. He runs in and he just takes them on and runs right by. And the guy hit him right in the legs, dead, right in the thighs. And he just bounced off, got 5 yards. That's impressive. So there are some great things about Isaac Guerendo. It's going to take a little bit of time, for him to get this thing kind of figured out, get where he needs to be. But ultimately, I think Guerendo is going to be a big help for the San Francisco 49ers moving forward. And that's ultimately what you're hoping. You're hoping you're going to get these guys to step in and make plays. And David Marazzo kind of echoing what a lot of people think is pay Trent now. So I think the biggest surprises were the 49ers going with 2 tight ends, 7 wide receivers. That was surprising. Elijah Mitchell ends up on season-ending IR, not even set to come back. 49ers only use one of their IR spots where those guys are destined to come back in Kalia Davis. Feliciano and Ambry Thomas are carried onto the active roster. They're likely going to go on IR in the next 24 to 48 hours, freeing up roster spots for other players. But ultimately, the 49ers deciding what they were going to do with this initial 53-man roster was very, very interesting. And Tommy says, wow, Hufanga is back. He is. Talanoa Hufanga could practice as soon as tomorrow. They activated him off the PUP list, meaning he's potentially going to be ready week 1. Now, I say potentially because we don't know at what stage he is as far as getting back. And so we'll see. I would say right now, you're cautiously optimistic that could happen. So really excited. David says, looking forward to the Thursday show with Chapman. I'm sure John's going to go ahead and tell you guys, but unfortunately Thursday, we're not going to be able to do the show this week. John is flying out. So there won't be a show on Thursday with Chapman this week. We'll bring it back next week. He sent me a text yesterday and let me know. So for all that's, I was going to get the announcement out, but since you asked, David, I'll go ahead and tell you now. So not happening with John this week. Tomorrow I am on with Mark Adams at 2 p.m. So if you want to check that out, I am available at that time. You guys can come on and talk with us then. So we'll not be able to do the John Chapman show this week, but it'll be back next week. I know it's not as fun of a week when we don't do the show, and I really enjoy doing it, but we're going to get there. And Lou says, is it possible Pearsall goes on IR? It is possible. I would say a little bit unlikely for the fact that he's in the blue vest and he's practicing. Once he went on IR, he would have to stop practicing. So I don't know about that. But if they felt that he wasn't going to be ready, they could put him on IR. That would make a lot of sense if you have Ronnie Bell, right? Then you have 6 wide receivers until Pearsall comes back. So, I mean, I don't want to say no because I've seen the 49ers do some roster movements here. So, I'm not counting that one out. And so maybe I'm hopeful, though, that Pearsall is going to take the blue vest off later this week or next week and that he'll be ready to go. So, but it is a definite possibility that could happen. and that's unfortunate. So hopefully it doesn't. I want to see Ricky Pearsall out there. I want everyone of you guys to be able to see Ricky Pearsall out there and see what we saw at training camp, because it's, he's looking pretty good. All right, guys, I'm going to check out. I'd like to tell you guys thanks for coming through. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.